Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on another edition of our interview. This time we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be interviewing from the perspective of a realtor on closing the first deal. And just to reintroduce myself, my name is Holly. My co-host is Dr. Gavin Adams, and we have our lovely guest, which is Rudy, Rude Boy. I don't know how you want to go on this.
Rudy is cool.
Yes. So yeah, we're just gonna ask you a few questions, answer it however you please, like don't have to be too formal. So to start off, can you elaborate on what inspired your real estate journey?
Yes. So for me, when it comes to real estate, it's been something that's kind of,
Wait, the volume went away.
am I better now?
Yes, you're better now. So what
Okay.
inspired your real estate journey?
So for me, my real estate journey was truly inspired by my family. We own a property in Boston and also just kind of creating equity. So I've always been someone that's been into knowledge, always liked acquisitions or property, whether it was buildings, homes, the way that they were made, the material, the character, all that interests me in the beginning. So as I got older, nobody really in my family was in real estate. So anytime I got a chance, it was just by visiting or my friends. I went to a pretty nice high school, so my friends would invite me to their house or I would go to their neighborhoods. And it was just always so nice to see the different kinds of living, the rooms, like what you can have to make your home feel comfortable and how that's different for everybody. And then it kind of got deeper in terms of equity and understanding what that means for so many different minorities.
So growing up, you mentioned that your family owns a home. Did you get to see like the process of acquiring that home, or is it just always been a part of your life?
So it's funny that you asked that. It was actually a new build house. So I remember when I guess my mom was under PNS, like they didn't take us to the offices when they were signing papers, but when they were gonna go see the house, they did take us like a couple times. And that was always cool because, we got to see the rooms or we got to see like a little bit, not necessarily down to the studs because they have to make sure that it's suitable or safe for people to be inside. But when they were able to assure that, we got to see the home before it was finished. So it was super cool.
That does sound cool. That is awesome. So like growing up, did your family talk about real estate or did they guys educate you on like, no?
Nope, nope. It was always, I mean, I grew up predominantly like my I'm a first generation. My parents are have immigrated for the Caribbean. So for them, it was always about just work hard, save your money, and one day you'll be able to make a really big purchase that changes your life. And I feel like that's kind of like the skills and the path that they took. To the point they worked super hard, they sacrificed, they did everything they had to do, and then they came a point where it made sense for them to purchase a home, and that's exactly what they did. But other than that, it wasn't always like a, hey guys, let me teach you about equity. Hey guys, let me teach you how to like refinance and pay a bill or how you can chop your mortgage down. Like, it wasn't necessarily any of that. No.
So I find it extremely interesting that when you were asked what inspired your real estate journey, you started mentioning keywords like equity, acquisitions, development, but something to me that really jumps out. That's for people who are really like in the know. That's like more real estate verbiage, right? But something that stood out to me was the neighborhoods where your friends lived. Now I think that's really important because sometimes education opens doors for us that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to enter. And sometimes just having those friendships, right, expose you to a different quality of life. So would you mind elaborating on what some of those neighborhoods were and what kind of turned that light bulb on for you?
Yeah, no, for sure. So when my parents assimilated themselves in Massachusetts, one of the places that we grew up in was Milton, Massachusetts. Now, for those that may know, Milton is one of the like more affluent cities, probably literally right outside of Boston. So a lot of great people live there, really nice, expensive homes. So I think we were always around that type of thing. But when we moved more into Boston, what people would consider the hood, um, we still were going to Catholic schools. So we were having friends that were from Abington, friends that were from West Roxbury, friends that were from like the outskirts, the suburbs, or what people would consider the sticks. And those places, the homes maybe cost the same amount, but you were getting a lot more for your money. Like these people's had finished basements, they had yards, they had basketball hoops, they had all these different things all at their property. They had pools. So those were the things where I was just like, man, maybe living in the city isn't all that it's cracked up to be kind of thing.
So your parents putting you in a certain type of school setting provided you with an opportunity to establish those relationships. Those relationships allowed you to go into homes that made you feel like I can have this in the future. I want this for myself and my family. I want the audience to zero in on the fact that generational wealth isn't always something that you acquire and hand off to your kids, right? His parents had the opportunity to go to Mass, go to Boston, and said, you know what, we're going to make sure that you have private education because we want to make sure you have top-notch education. And with that, there is a wealth that came with it. It is your education. So without the education, we wouldn't have been here, right, to begin with. So shout out to your
Yes.
parents for even taking that far.
Yes, for sure. And in terms of like, I love where you're kind of shedding that light in terms of the value isn't only in the acquisitions, it is in the perspective, it is in the knowledge that you gain, it is how you treat people. Like, even when I think I'm kind of getting more in a space now trying to say things aren't good or bad. Things happen the way that they're supposed to. We'll respond if we have the correct resources. And I think our intent, as long as that is positive, then doesn't matter what we're kind of adjusting for or from. But I think I love that you're shedding the light on that in terms of where the wealth really is.
That's good stuff, guys. So I guess going into helping your clients finding their first home, can you just shed some light on what should buyers take into consideration when they're doing the first home search?
Yeah. So for me, something that I always like to um, implore on, clients or prospective people is always to have a conversation. So I believe in before you're even ready, once the start starts to kind of fester in your mind, I would say start to engage with a professional in some way, shape, form, of fashion. You can let them know, like, hey, like I'm probably not ready right now, but these are the thoughts that are kind of coming across my mind. Because a lot of times I think based on other people's experiences, if we were to ask our parents or if these are our resources, a lot of times what they went through to acquire a home is not the same today. So a lot of that information might be dated. So I think including a professional, the moment you start to have those thoughts, what that truly does a full view of what that may look like for you today, as opposed to what it looked like for somebody maybe even a month ago. As these interest rates and everything is changing ever so much, it's like it's very good to get somebody that knows what's going on.
So what would you say are some of the mistakes that first time home buyers make?
For me, some of the mistakes I would say is taking the wrong advice. That probably has led people to not buy homes, that has led people to not get pre-approved, that has led people to not having the fruitful conversation. Because a lot of times it really is, maybe you're not ready right now, but this professional can help you tailor everything so that you're ready probably in 3 months when you thought you probably needed to wait a year and a half.
Okay. So when you're working with people, like, what is the first thing that you make them do when they call you and they're like, hey, I want to buy a home?
So for us, we have a process. It's called onboarding. So what we do is we'll generally sit down with the client if they have, the ability to be there physically. That is perfect. If not, we can do something virtually. But essentially what we will do is we have a packet that we'll go through to try to help zero in on everything that is a must for this client, everything that's kind of like a want, and then the things that they kind of can do without. And then from there, we're going to build out a profile for this client. We're going to put everything in our CRM. That way that they're getting information constantly. We're going to prepare them in terms of letting them know what the climate is currently. So sometimes, depending on where you are in the world, it's not always easy to buy a home. It's not always easy to get it under contract. It's not, it's not everything is like it looks on TV where you can just go to houses around the corner and be like, oh, let me look at that one. Let me look at it now. There's some places where there's probably one or two houses that are kind of like in your bracket. And if you don't get it, good luck. So it's kind of just setting people up, letting them know the expectations and letting them know what we do as a brokerage to kind of help solidify their success in a timeline that they're looking for. Um, and of course, signing documents. I think that is something that is very important within protecting yourself in real estate, is making sure that you understand, you know what you're reading, and going through that with everybody.
Okay. So like if let's say I'm a client and I start off working with you, do you make them sign like a real estate binding contract, or could they just be like, you know what, I'm not gonna work with you, I'm gonna go work for someone else? Like, how does that work?
So there's no penalty. So what we call it is a success document or a success agreement or a VIP agreement. Those are kind of like all synonymous for us. And what that truly does is that enables you to hire me to work for you. Because we are all independent contractors as realtors, and I'm not sure if people are privy to the National Association of Realtors and that lawsuit that kind of just took place. But
Yeah.
it is very imperative in this climate that we are designating who is representing who. That way, there's no ambiguity. That way, um, there's less there's less hanging in the balance for people, um, because you definitely want to say who's working for who by the time you get to the closing table, because those checks are, what a lot of people are staking their lives on. So you definitely want to make sure that those things are etched out. And then most importantly, if you're giving somebody your resources, you want to make sure that they're your client. So I never call somebody my client until they sign, our success agreement or our VIP agreement.
So how do you feel about that lawsuit? Like I heard that it changes the way the commissions are paid. Like, do you feel like that's gonna impact you guys in a negative way, or is it gonna be the same, or is it gonna improve your commission rates and stuff like that since you don't have to split it with someone else?
So I wouldn't even say that, because I mean, if you're not paying somebody, a lot of times I don't I don't know if anybody has sold a home before. I know we're kind of speaking from a perspective of first-time home buyers, so a lot of these people may not have sold a home before. But I'd say a lot of times everything is up for negotiation. So after this lawsuit, in terms of what I'll say, especially to start, I'm appreciative for my brokerage, because my broker is someone who has been on the board for a while and he was privy to a lot of what was going on. So when I became a licensed realtor, he kind of had things in place and he was explaining things in order for us to secure our check and in order for us to be in compliance with everything, knowing what is to come in the future. So for me, I don't think it impacts us because we were prepared. We already were. This VIP or success agreement, this is where it outlines what our fee is. So if you're a buyer and the seller is no longer compensating us, we go into it understanding what our fee is. So we never left it up to the other side. But for the seller's agent, that just changes your negotiation now. Yeah, a lot of times you're not taking more home, because when you negotiated the 6%, the 7%, the 5%, whatever you negotiated, you understood that you were giving a portion of it away. So, and you would tell the seller that. So now you can't say, hey, I need 7% and I'm keeping all of it. Like that's
Yeah.
just not, you need to tell them how their money is being spent, or, how they're paying you or what it's going to. So it's not a way where someone is making more money in any one way. It's probably just, again, it's all documentation, all
Okay.
documentation.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. So it's more
I know
clear
it's
for
scary
the
for people. Yeah, I mean, it's scary for some people because then I know we were kind of talking a little bit before, and we kind of have some backgrounds in a version of sales where you had to be in front of people and you kind of had to get their consent. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to these type of things, they struggle with the conversation because they don't know truly how to get the consent from somebody or what they're looking for. So for us, I think we've kind of been bred in it for a little bit. So we kind of understand, hey, this is what it's going to be moving forward. Whether you want to sign with us or not, it's like whoever you're going to choose for your representation, they're going to be looking for the same thing. So we're actually not acting out of the norm.
Mhm. Good. So going back to like the first time buyers, like what are some common financial mistake first time home buyers make and how can they be avoided?
Please do not purchase anything on credit cards. Don't buy a new car. Don't get a new job. Don't do anything that would impact your financial view to the bank unless it is you just literally just stacking your money from your paychecks. I wouldn't say make don't do anything. Don't go buy furniture. Don't open a car. Don't buy a car. If you're under contract, do not do any. Don't go on vacation. Don't do any of that.
Have you experienced these type of issues with your clients? Is it normal or do people take it for granted?
They do take it for granted. They do take it for granted because I've noticed that, you know, I think for us, I definitely tell people, especially our lenders, everybody in our team lets the buyer know that, hey, you should probably not buy anything, don't do anything egregious for a little bit. And what we'll end up doing is we can push all those type of buying stuff all the way out. Let's close on the deal. That way the bank doesn't red flag anything and doesn't stop us when we get to closing. Because yes, that has happened before where someone's either lost their job right before closing or someone bought some furniture. They wanted to buy a new car so that it was parked in their driveway when they got home. It was a lot. And sometimes you just gotta wait. Sometimes you just gotta wait.
So one of the things that you mentioned earlier is off with start dialogue off with a professional so you can leverage their experience. And then you mentioned not taking the wrong advice. So how would a newbie kind of look out for red flags with regards to wrong advice and realizing that the person they thought was the professional isn't actually the person they should be confiding in or trusting?
Ooh, I think that comes down to active listening. I think when someone is letting you know what they're looking for, let's say for a newbie, right? Say if they're coming to the table and they're saying like, hey, um, I don't know where my credit is, or my credit is such and such, and I have this level of experience. I don't really know this about that. And can you help me with this? And then if somebody is just kind of jumping down your throat and kind of they have their own agenda, I think that is when you can start to see that that person is probably not aligned with you. And I think when we were talking about that success agreement, I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's an alignment time for us to understand like, hey, can we work together? And if not, it's probably best that you probably find another professional or, vice versa. Because not every situation is a great situation. I think you have to find the people that understand and are looking to help you achieve what you're looking for.
Great. So with that's so easy, right? But with that, you mentioned something in terms of certain people looking for certain things. And when there's a newer purchaser, a home buyer who's looking to become more of an investor, do you think there are more realtors who can satisfy or support beginning investors more than others? What type of advice would you give someone who's looking not only to become a new homeowner, but wants to get their feet wet with becoming an investor as well?
Yeah. So I would, if someone understands that that's their trajectory, when they kind of disclose that information to their professional or whoever that may be that they're kind of interviewing, then I would, at that point, let them know. And depending on their response, if they have the resources, if they have that level of tact in their tool, then I think that's where you can make that decision on if this person is aligned with the way that, because when we talk about investing, there's in a myriad amount of versions of investing when it comes to real estate. So I think it'll come down to really like, does this person have that level of experience? And sometimes I wouldn't even always use experience as that leverage. Is like sometimes it's a lot about figuring it out. Like, does this person have the resources to figure it out? Do they want to figure it out? Are they going to be attentive? Are they going to do the follow up calls? Are they going to do all the small things to actually make the deal move forward? So sometimes, because you'll find some veteran people out here that aren't as crafty, that aren't as dedicated, that aren't as, they might have some of the knowledge, but are they going to be that person that's really going to walk you through this situation? So like I think it's really about alignment on a lot of these levels.
I'm happy you highlighted that. This probably isn't up your alley for us, within your handle, because you're not a mortgage broker, right? You're a real estate agent, correct?
Correct.
What advice, and I'm sure you've dealt with this as well, right? You get to the closing table, and sometimes if they don't have that FHA where they're financing the close, the unexpected arises, right? I know in New York, for my second deal in New York City, I was blindsided because I had to come up with $40,000, $38,000 in closing fees when on my first deal, my FHA, I was able to finance that. So I was scrambling within the last 48 hours trying to figure out what I was going to do. Do you come across any of those examples and with conventional loans without people realizing exactly what they need at the closing table, and what type of advice can you provide one?
I will say that I personally have never experienced that. A lot of the resources that I like to affiliate myself with, it's like the same thing that I would go through in my success agreement in like my onboarding is almost the same kind of style that my lenders use. We kind of go through the whole rigmarole because to get to the closing table and then to be blindsided, a lot of times that's where some deals will fall apart. And for us, we're not in the name of rushing, we're in the name of getting it right. Like, sometimes we don't get the deal at first, but by the time we actually get the deal that we want, it's always the perfect house. So I will say that I can't say that I've experienced that before, because we check off all the boxes. We make sure that we cross all our T's and dot our I's before we get there. We do have attorneys, we have lenders that are phenomenal. So even in the moments where we've had clients that have spent money while we were under contract and it literally put us in jeopardy of not closing, we were still able to do that because we found ways, we had to be creative. So I don't think we ever let things get that close to the closing table where somebody can get blindsided like that, because we understand the gravity and how that could literally mean that nothing happens. We're definitely in the game of closing deals. Like, we definitely want to help people achieve the things that they're looking for. So we can't be negligent on some of those things.
So going back to what Holly mentioned about the NRA, are there any tips or hints you want to give potential sellers or buyers that you probably shouldn't, but would be willing to help the community? Like, is there an opportunity to take advantage of the fact that it's now a discussion, right? We know 6% is up for grabs, but does that give the seller any more leverage? Can they now say, you know what? I don't want to share that. The only thing I want to let go of is 5% because I want 1% to come back to me at closing. Is that a thing?
Yeah, so that's very much in the realm of a conversation, and that's going to come down to that agent on how they're going to be willing to disperse that 5%. Depending on the average, in New York or Boston or in this Northeast market, like the average home sale price is pretty high. So that 5% can go a long way. And what I would say to potential sellers when you're looking to negotiate in terms of putting your house on the market, and the buyer's agent, like a lot of times when you're offering that co-broke compensation, it's so that that buyer's agent is bringing their qualified buyer to this open house, to this listing. And a lot of times that's a level of motivation that makes your home more appealing, like, so, sometimes the client, they don't know anything about that back end. They're just like, hey, like, this is the home that I like this house, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of times it comes down to the numbers and how all that's going to work. I would never stop myself from helping my client get their house. But if I look at it and I understand that this person isn't compensating me on the other side, that's probably going to be more out of the buyer's pocket. So is that buyer now going to have to rearrange their funds in order to purchase this house? So that seller making it almost financeable, that broker's fee making it financeable in a way during that process by offering compensation actually makes your home more valuable. So that's what I would tell a seller is a lot of times paying an agent less doesn't always mean that you're getting more. It doesn't always mean that it's a better deal. Put it that way.
So you feel like I feel like listening to that, I feel like this new law is opening up a lot of gray areas. It sounds like because that now it may cost people more to sell their homes or to even buy. It almost seems like they're gonna come out of pocket even more.
Potentially, and I think where you say yes, it opens up the room for a lot of gray areas. So those people that aren't comfortable with those conversations or getting people to sign that document saying like, "Hey, I'm working with you," that's where a lot of this is going to get hairy for people. And I actually, it's a part of the lawsuit that you need to have it. If you're going to show somebody a house, you need to say in what capacity are you working for this person. So all that is now having to be etched out because they don't want any ambiguity. They understand how much lawsuits could potentially come from something like this.
So with this new law, I haven't fully read into it, but could someone be selling the house and also have like another client who's buying a house and it's like, oh, you guys are the perfect match. Y'all should go for it and double dip. Like, can they do that?
Oh yeah, that's always been a thing. So that's dual agency. But yeah, that's
Um,
always been something that was possible. If you had a buyer and you had a seller and it was a happy marriage, that is kind of like you're operating in a more unbiased capacity. You're just making sure that both sides just have to operate in terms of like all terms should be agreeable. Everything should be like everybody should be good. But like me, if I was that dual agent, I can't tell this person like, hey, negotiate this, make sure you do that. And I can tell this person to do this. And that's I can't do that. I can just make sure that everybody is doing their part.
okay, that's good. So are there any first-time home buyer grants or programs that you present to your clients?
So I know for a lot of people, they love that Mass. If you were in Massachusetts, there was the Mass Streams grant. In Rhode Island, they had a grant. Those things were amazing when they were here. At the moment, I believe there are some small banks that may have access to these things, but it really comes down to a buyer's profile. So this is another situation where I would say if somebody's interested or they feel like they have a decent profile to purchase a home, but they're just maybe missing out on maybe some down payment or some closing costs, I would say, yeah, definitely reach out to an agent because you never know what resources they have in terms of lenders. Because for us, we have lenders or affiliates come to our office every Monday and they have different programs that they're letting us know that they have and things like that. So there are definitely programs that can help people if you fit the box.
So what would be some of does each program have different qualifications? Like, could you give an example of like what would be considered a good candidate?
Yeah, so for some people, like, I mean, depending on the program, for what I can give you an example is like, if you made 110% more than the area median average, you lived in Boston, looking to purchase in Boston, um, your credit score was above like a 650 or a 680, like those type of criterias are the things that they're going to be outlining. And then if you fit those molds, a lot of times then there will be funds that are available to you. A lot of times you can't have assets over like 75 or 150,000 or something like that. So they really kind of comb through certain things to try to make sure that you fit this box because I guess it's a version of like deterring displacement, just making sure certain people are able to stay in certain places.
Can you elaborate on that bias profile thing a bit more? That's not something that us as purchasers or homeowners usually hear. So you're letting us in on what happens behind closed doors. So can you dive into that a bit more, please?
Yes, no problem. So for instance, like if I were to say, if what you guys were to come to me and let me know, like, hey guys, like I think I think I want to buy a house. And so say we sat down together, we went through an onboarding, I got a little bit of your profile and I was like, hey, like I think you might actually fit the bill for this actual program. Let me put you in touch with this lender. And then the lender would then look at your credit score. They would see how much you make in terms of the area median average or income. They would look at if you have assets over a certain amount. And so all these things totaling could essentially make you eligible for certain grants. I don't
Okay.
know if that completely like helps outline that, but for those, if you have a question, if you feel like you fit in a box, you feel like, hey, I live in the city or I don't live in the city and I think I might be eligible for something. I also have links that can help see if there's anything that fits for people. So like I can help share those things as well. But yeah, I would say definitely those are things where people would definitely want to get in touch with a professional.
Okay. So can you share any memorable experiences or success stories you've had with helping people purchase their first home?
Yeah, I love helping people purchase their first home. One of the main reasons is because of how important it is when somebody walks into that first place that they're about to live in. But I probably have two or three. So with these grant situations, I'll probably highlight those. But those are so great because by the time people get to the closing table, whatever they use as their down payment, they're essentially getting that back. So I've probably helped two or three families get checks back at closing. So you know how yourself for yourself, Gavin, how you were saying how you were kind of scrambling to kind of get that closing cost. These people didn't have to scramble. They actually got money at like that closing table. That's based off of negotiations, getting money back at closing. That's, you know, the amount of money that we got back in the grant. But those feelings are amazing because oftentimes I think the narrative is you have to spend a lot of money to purchase a home. And that's not true for everybody, you know, like, and that's why I say like it's important to get in a conversation with a professional because you never know what that climate is for that day or for those times because those people, each of those clients walked away with 10,000 or more at closing. And you know, that's substantial when you talk about you just acquired a piece of an asset. You know, like all these people at this point have over $80,000 in equity. And you know, like I think that that's just amazing. I you know that may not make sense or hit home for everybody right now, no pun intended, but that's a big deal.
That is a big
That's a big
deal. Especially when you acquire a new home, there's always things that you want to fix to make it your own. So that $10,000 can, help you go a little
goes a long
further.
way.
Yeah.
Adds a little cushion, you know, for those people who don't always have reserves or stuff like that. Like those things are huge, 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 huge.
Hmm. So next question, what does generational wealth mean to you? What role has it played in your life, and what role will it play in your future?
What does it mean to me? I think to highlight Gav in the beginning is it looks like knowledge, it looks like education, it looks like grace, it looks like um, not necessarily being motivated by popular opinion. It's doing your own research. It's having resources to do your own research. And even if you don't have it, being resourceful or creative enough to actually help find those things yourself. I think in terms of real estate, how generational wealth kind of rings for me, it's like my family lives in the city of Boston. And there are not too many people who can afford to continue to live in the city of Boston. Um, and I'm grateful for the fact that my parents own because we can't be displaced. As long as we make our payments and we, you know, take care of our mortgage, we won't have an issue when it comes to something like that. And as long as the mortgage is being paid, we own a multifamily home. So if we wanted to, we can put family in it and just kind of charge us whatever prices we wanted. So as long as the mortgage is being paid. So those are the things that I think is super important and you're never truly at the whim of the world when you have ownership. So I think that's a version of generational wealth and understanding how equity just builds. Um, I'll kind of raise my hand because I want to interject on kind of what I'm saying here. But a lot of reasons why the wealthy are wealthy is because they own something. They were able to leverage that, and they were able to buy more things, and then that just compiles. I think we may have a concept of the compound effect. But once you just have generations, like say, if you've bought a house, your mom's bought a house, your mom, your grandmother's bought a house, and these are just properties that are just continuing in your family's lineage, that's a level of wealth that could never be understood. There's places in the world right now that the homes cost like over $3 million, but the people that live there don't make more than 100,000.
Mm.
That's crazy. But it's because it was
And
passed down.
yes, yes. So like understanding that, like, that to me is kind of one of the biggest catalysts to being within real estate, because I live in a place not necessarily that's being gentrified, but you see development happening every day. And you don't know what that truly means or whose family is being affected by that, but somebody's family is being affected by that. So I think it's
So
just being in the know.
I didn't mean to cut you off. You can continue.
No, you're good. I was literally like, that was the end of it. But what did you say though?
I was going to ask, we're speaking of the past. So since we're speaking of the past, what are some of your future real estate goals, if you have any? Whether that
Future real
be
estate.
starting your own brokerage firm, whether that be scaling up more or more vertical alignment and starting your mortgage brokerage firm as well, or even investing in some properties.
Yeah,
What's in
so
your
it
future?
looks like it looks like a little bit of all of that, to be honest. Like real estate is so broad that I think for a lot of people, there's just the idea of there's a realtor, you're selling or you're buying. But there's so many different levels to it. For me, I definitely want to become more vertically integrated, in terms of what I have as a process and what I provide as a service to my clients. I'm looking to just do more in bigger business. So, like, I would love to do things that are maybe closer to the commercial side, which is anything above 4 units. So anything from a single or a condo all the way up to 4 units, they would consider residential. Anything above that, they would consider as commercial. So for me, it's just like, yeah, I want to get more contractors in my Rolodex. I want to get more lenders. I want to just get more versions of business within real estate, because I understand that that creates opportunities. I think I have a really good eye when it comes to understanding trajectory for certain neighborhoods. So I think it's just about coming in alignment with those different facets.
That's awesome. Well, Gavin is a contractor, so you can put him in your Rolodex now.
Yeah, and I heard that you're out in New York too, which is phenomenal. I have a few friends that are potentially looking to purchase out there. They currently rent like less than 2 miles from the Barclays, and they have been telling me that they want to buy. So they're originally from Boston, but they live in New York. They do work out there. So yeah, yeah. So I love how connections happen. So that would be beautiful.
I can certainly link them with some of the real estate agents out there.
Beautiful. Do
Um,
you have anything that
no,
you're working on, or what kind of? I guess I'll ask you a couple of questions. What kind of things do you build or do you work on?
so I've not developed yet. We're kind of getting into that now. I'm much more into purchasing already standing units, even if they look like they're about to fall down, just to make sure they can remain upstanding and we can renovate and build that equity, like you touched on earlier in the interview.
Hmm.
So I like buy and hold investments. That's the type
Hmm.
of strategist I am. I'm not a flipper, not a wholesaler. In fact, I like to find wholesale deals and then buy and hold them. I completed a few burrs, but that was years after I knew about it, years after I studied it, and only when I really had enough money to take those chances. And then I really, really, it was like timing and opportunity meets preparation. And I kind of exploded with the Connecticut market. I can't
Mm.
act like I knew what was going to happen, but I'm like, all right, it only makes sense. If everything north of Connecticut is blowing up, and everything south and west of Connecticut is blowing up. It's only a matter of time. So I invested in locations, markets where they were either like really inexpensive and had some cash flow, or I had the opportunity to sit on it and wait for appreciation to take hold. Now, in upstate New York, appreciation didn't take hold for 6 years. Within New York City, believe it or not, it took about 3 years until after I bought my properties in New York City for them to show appreciation. But in Connecticut, literally like 2 months later, like the people in the at the mortgage brokerage firm that I got my hard money from would ask, like, yo, how are you finding these deals? Seriously. I'm like, I just stay on top of it. When other people are sleeping and I know I should be resting, I'm on the internet. I'm on Zillow, I'm on Realtor, I'm all over. Or any place I can find houses, find deals, or even reading articles just to stay abreast of the information that's taking place. Like I knew about developments that were happening in Binghamton 3 years before it took place because they were already discussing it. So of course I'm going to start to purchase in the area where the new nursing school is going to be developed, right? Because eventually once that's developed and other buildings or new housing is being developed for the university, then all right, granted, I might not be able to charge as much monthly, but I know I'm going to have some forced appreciation, and I know whoever can't get those nice apartments are going to settle for mine, and mine is going to be just a tad bit more affordable than those at the top of the market.
Exactly.
I've been doing it for a while. I hold true, I sacrifice. I live way below my means. I don't try to like grow too fast, and I have some big goals. So it's all about the journey and the relationships one develops along the way.
For sure. For sure. No, I love that. And congratulations. Those are great stories and bits of experience along the way. I think that's phenomenal.
Thanks.
And I think one thing that you guys may have brought up, or I think Holly might have asked me, but like that whole thing that was happening between FHA and conventional, like how they went from, of course, FHA is always, 3.5% down, and then conventional for a long time was either 10, 15, 20%, and then recently went down to 5%. So that was a big catalyst for a lot of people too.
So why is it that people prefer the FHA over the conventional? Does FHA just take that much longer to close because of the documentation?
I wouldn't even say that. We've been able to close FHA within 30 days. Where FHA is a little more stringent is on the performance of the homes. So for places like where, probably places like Connecticut, there are places like this in like Fall River, New Bedford. So sellers are wanting more for their homes. Regardless of the performance of the rents. They've owned the homes for probably over 20, 15 years, and they're happy taking $900 each unit for a three family. But that's just not conducive for the mortgages that are coming forth. So if you were to get something under contract with an FHA and then they look at those rents, they're going to be like, yeah, there's something that's called self-sufficiency. They're going to say this isn't going to pass self-sufficiency. And so that is something that doesn't have to get proven with conventional. So they'll just say, hey, whatever the rents are, we know that we can assume market rents. So we'll just take that and they'll just move forward. But FHA, they're a little more stringent. They're a little more strict. They want to see all that. It's more about the bank wanting to assure their investment. That's really all it comes down to. Unfortunately. Unfortunately. And I think, yeah, with FHA, I think it's less skin in the game. At least with conventional, it's 5%, not that much more. But, again, depending on the purchase price, it's definitely thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I'm noticing on Zillow, Holly, that if you're trying to like estimate how much you would pay with 3.5% down, Zillow doesn't even calculate it for you anymore. You have to put down 20%. I did 5, 10, 15. I got
Oh, wow.
and I was like, yeah.
They're probably just saying like, hey, if you're going to be someone that's purchasing FHA, like you're just going to need to do your own due diligence. Like we'll give you kind of just like a little quick rubric for you to kind of just figure it out if it's cheaper for you, but that's the whole thing. If you're putting less money down, you're probably paying more in your mortgage. So
Yep, it's true.
That is true. Well, that is true. Well, is there any other questions you have, Gavin?
Oh, I'm all set.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rudy, for joining us today. You definitely provided a lot of insight into what the real estate market is looking at, I'm stumbling over my words, but it's okay. But
yes,
thank
it
you
is.
so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time and looking forward to having you again on our podcast in the future. Bye, everyone.
Yes, it'll be a nice little check-in. Pleasure. Thank you guys.
You're welcome.